Hey, I'm Jay, and you're listening to the More Than podcast. I'm a former Miss Arizona USA, professional model, confidence coach, and red carpet host. Don't let those titles fool you, though. I'm a 30-year-old, overly curious woman who loves to connect with others over the good, the bad, and the hilarious parts of our stories. From the outside looking in, my 20s looked really glamorous, but in reality, I struggled deeply with my confidence, self-worth, and mental health. I went on a deep healing journey to figure out how to live a life that felt as fulfilling as it looked, and now I help you do that too. I'm not afraid to go deep, and our guests aren't either. We talk all about mindset, mental health, confidence, relationships, beauty, boundaries, business, fashion, while giving you tangible tools for your own growth. This is one of those girl chats that leave you feeling inspired and empower you to stop settling and create a life you love. You're so much more than whatever's holding you back, and I'm so glad you're here. I have the privilege of sitting down with somebody who I've admired virtually for a very long time. You're a multifaceted mom, a wife, a business owner, and a breast cancer survivor. And I'm really excited to get to know your story. So Nasreen.
Goodness, thank you.
Thanks
that is
for
like
coming.
The sweetest intro. I appreciate it. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so excited that I finally locked you down and I finally got you here.
It took a minute. It took us a minute between both of our schedules.
Exactly. But the timing is perfect.
Yes.
And we run in similar circles, but every time your name gets brought up, your reputation precedes you. Everyone's like, she's the sweetest woman you'll ever meet in your life.
Wow, that is the sweetest compliment.
It's true. You have an energy about you. And I'm excited to get to know your story because you've been through a lot.
Yeah, it's been a ride, to say the least.
Sure has been. So take me back before you became an online presence of over 500,000 people. What were you doing for work before then, and how did you transition to becoming this online personality?
Yeah, gosh, sometimes that feels like a blur. It feels like a lifetime ago that I didn't do what I do in some weird way. But my background is in sales. I worked for Hilton for many years, then I did pharmaceutical sales for many years. And then when I had my son Reza, which was in 2010.
Oh my goodness.
I decided that I wanted to stay home with him. And my job at that time, pharmaceutical sales, I was like driving around all day. I was traveling a lot. It just wasn't what I envisioned for myself long term. And my husband had finally graduated dental school and he was working. And so we both agreed like this would be a great time for me to take a break for a while. So I did that. I did all the mom things. I helped my husband open his practice. I ended up having 2 more babies after that. And when my youngest, Sophia, was about a year old is when I started kind of getting the itch, being like, you know what, I feel like I can do more now. You know, my kids our parents had both moved here after they retired. So we had like a lot of help and, you know, I was like getting the itch to do something else.
Yeah. Well, knowing that you get the itch to do it, but then executing on that itch. And now your oldest is 14.
He's 14.
But you didn't start until your youngest was 1. So your youngest,
and she's 8. So about 7 years ago.
7 years. That's really not that long.
It really isn't.
That's wild.
It kind of happened. It happened really fast, I feel like, in the beginning. I think it used to be, you know, being a social presence on Instagram in the past, like, I feel like it was pretty different than it is now. Like these days you have to like go viral for, you know, somebody to grow a following. And that kind of really wasn't the case back when I started. There wasn't a ton of girls doing it. But I kind of had a different niche market, I would say, because I was older. A lot of the girls who were doing it were a lot younger and their fashion was like so cute, but also a lot dressier and maybe not as like everyday mom, which is what I was doing. So I felt like my following grew super organically because there were a lot of women that were my age that were looking for someone to follow that was, you know, not dressed to the nines every day, just in her cute mom outfits, dropping off kids. And it was very like just realistic and organic for me. I really didn't have to try super hard. I showed what I was wearing in real life. And that was often just like cute workout clothes or a cute t-shirt and jeans and flat sandals, like, you know, like just like what us moms are rocking every day. That's
what the majority
what it was. Yeah.
And that's what I'm looking for every time when I'm trying to get outfit inspo, especially in this new chapter, trying to figure out how to like dress your body. But I'm looking at people that belong on the runway and their style. And I'm like, I can't pull stuff together like that.
And I love to look at it. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah.
I loved the high fashion stuff and I love seeing everybody's cute outfits, but it's not, that for me is like 5% of what I wear, majority of what I wear. Like, I don't go out every weekend downtown. I'm not like going to fancy dinners all the time. I'm just going, around our little bubble that we live in.
I love it.
Running my kids around. So it really was a different time back then. And I felt like I was able to really get a loyal following, which to me is the most important part of being on social media is, I never aspired to have like millions of followers. I just really wanted to focus on the girls that I had there that were in the same kind of like phase of life as me. And I could really relate to, there are so many girls that follow me that have been following me since the beginning. And we're friends, like I feel like there's so many friends and, years later, which I know we'll get to, is when I really felt like, okay, this community they really are my friends,
They care about you.
They really did.
And that's hard to do, but I think it's also a testament to the fact that you show up authentically as yourself, because people can't get to know somebody that they don't feel like they actually know, but you're willing to share so much and get really personal. But I'm curious, before you ever even make that transition, before you have this online presence, you go from the corporate world to, it sounds like you got married pretty young.
I got married when I was 26.
Okay.
Started having kids at 29. And then I think I had Sophia at 35. I started this when I was around 35, 36 years old.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that, especially because you see so many people with the excuses of like, I didn't start soon enough, so I'm just not going to get started.
Yeah.
And you're living proof that you can start at any time.
Absolutely. I feel like if there's something you're passionate about and something that you really feel like you're bringing value, there is no age to like, that's too late, in my opinion.
Yeah, you just have to be passionate about it,
Absolutely.
Right? Now, this could be a very selfish question because it is very pinpoint for the phase of life I'm in, but I know that a lot of our audience can relate to that. How did you mentally make the shift from working in sales, working in corporate, having this career, to then being like, I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom?
Yeah.
Was that hard for you to do? How did you fully embrace that?
Initially, yes. I'm a very talkative, chatty person, and I loved having coworkers, and I worked on a team and all of that. We had a lot of change. So we were living in Boston for Nazim's dental school, and we moved there from Texas. We both were graduates from University of Texas. We met here, all that, got married. Actually, we got engaged, and then he moved, and then I moved and followed him there after we got engaged so that we could start our life together, but we weren't ready to have kids until a little bit later on. And then I think I just knew, I feel like I had this feeling in me that I always knew I wanted to stay home with my kids if my life allowed, if our circumstances allowed for it. Mm-hmm. So while yes, it was a big change, like I kind of craved that change. My mom stayed home with us a lot. I mean, she was a small business owner. She's an artist. And so she was kind of like in and out doing her own thing, but also like was home with us and available to us all the time. And I really wanted that for my kids too. But it was a change. I mean, to be alone at home all day, especially in the beginning when they're newborns, and my husband was working crazy hours when he first graduated. I mean, he was really starting from the ground up, and he was working his tail off, and sometimes wasn't even there when Reza would wake up and wasn't home yet when he would go to bed. So it truly was just me.
Wow.
And we didn't have our family there at that time. They hadn't moved here yet. So it was hard there. I'm not going to lie. Like there were days that I'd cry and be like, I don't know if I can do this. Like I would cry when he would leave to go to work. I'd be like, I'm going to be by myself all day. But I quickly formed like a little mom network of other moms in the same phase of life as me with like babies that were a similar age. And that was truly made just by like word of mouth connections. Like one of my friends would be like, oh, so-and-so just had a baby. I've got to get y'all connected. And so-and-so just had a baby. And we would we had kind of like this little play group with these tiny infant babies. I think Reza was maybe 9 weeks old when I went to my first one.
Wow.
Somewhere around that age. And it was a lifeline for me. My goodness. That is like something that would be my biggest piece of advice for a new mom, even if it's just one person that you can connect with that has a baby in the same similar age range. It got me through motherhood in the beginning. And I can say that for all of us in that group, we all really felt the same way.
I've heard that time and time again, that community is everything.
It truly is. And nobody nobody gets it until they get it. So I had a lot of friends, but not all of them had kids yet. And, you know, of course they were and are such an important part of my life. But in that phase of life, I really needed people that were going through the same things as me.
That could get it.
Yeah.
I mean, so much changes. I have a whole newfound respect for women in general, because obviously you see people that decide to get pregnant, you have this beautiful baby, and then you get to see like the highlight version of it when she is out of the house put together with this beautiful baby. But all the behind the scenes and the daily struggles, and you add hormone changes and body changes and your mental health on top of it. It's a lot.
It's a lot. I can remember so many nights like being awake in the middle of the night and like texting my other girlfriends who were doing the same thing. Been like, you know, he won't fall back asleep. What, you know, we're all just like bouncing ideas off each other. Nobody cares how many ounces your baby took or how many minutes they slept, except for another mom going through the same thing. I promise it was wild. Like it was such an important part of my early motherhood days to have that community.
Okay. I'm taking mental notes, because I need that. And I think having that transition to being so purpose-filled through that, while also knowing that it's okay to not shut down the other sides of you that make you so multifaceted.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think that's where maybe mom guilt comes in. I've been hearing a lot of that too.
Yeah.
That whether you decide to stay home or whether you can't stay home because that's not right for your family, or you have other passions. Is that something that is a struggle for you even now, dictating your own career?
For sure. You know, Sophia was only a year old, like I said, when I was kind of really more doing this consistently. And I had never like had anybody else watch my kids. I was home with Reza and Layla all the time until they went to preschool. I didn't even lean on our parents a ton back then. But then I had Sophia, and I was, you know, she was like the easiest, sweetest little baby. And I did feel guilty for like leaving her behind for a few hours here and there when I would go like shoot content or whatever that might be. But I also felt that in some ways I was a better mom the third time around, because I did have a different outlet. And I don't mean that I don't even think that I realized I might have needed that in the beginning. You know, I don't think I felt a void of not doing something outside the house with my first two. But once I did have that fulfillment later on, I realized, you know, because when I would come home and be with her, I was glued to her, and like my attention was all on her and the kids, you know? And maybe when I was home, I was like too worried about like, I have to do laundry, I have to do this, I have to cook, I'm like trying to do everything, and felt so spread thin. Whereas the third time around, I just felt more purposeful, I guess, more intentional.
I love that. And I feel like that's going to be a really big piece of advice for the women listening, because choosing yourself or choosing to do something that makes you happy or stepping away from your baby, even for a couple hours, can induce a lot of guilt, but it can also be one of the best things for you.
I used to feel guilty even if I would go and leave to go do a workout. And not for any other reason other than myself. My husband is the most like supportive husband ever. He'd be like, go do it, like do whatever you want to do. Like this is a partnership. We've never had those roles of like, it was my job to take care of the kids, you know, at all. And he was working full time at that time, but he was always pushing me to do whatever, but I had that own guilt on myself to even go do a workout. Like, how silly is that? And now it's very different. I put my exercise and my health as a major priority, and my kids see that, and I think that they will do that because they see that, you know?
Yeah, they're watching every single thing that you do.
Absolutely.
And we were talking off camera, you're in a very sweet spot of your child's age right now, and also just being able to kind of have that career balance. But I'm sure it took a long time to get there. I'm sure you went through a lot of different phases to get there. For somebody that is listening that wants to be able to have a creative outlet, let's say they want to start dabbling and becoming an influencer, they're interested in being able to share their outfits or beauty or whatever. I know consistency is key, but how do you come up with the creativity behind what you do? How do you fuel that side of yourself?
You know, for me, I am really not one of those creators that's like coming up with new ideas every day and doing like all the trends. I've never been that way. It's never like come naturally to me in that way. I really just try to show up as myself and share my everyday truth, like what I'm doing in like whether that's going to a workout or going lunch with friends, what I'm wearing, you know, what Sephora haul I just actually bought because I actually wanted to, instead of like coming up with things. I think when you are truly authentic, it's not as hard to come up with the ideas of what to do. Because if you're chasing what someone else is doing, yeah, it's going to be a lot of work. You're going to have to really think about what you're doing. You're going to have to map that out. And I just have never had the personality for that, to be honest. I just don't know any other way other than how I do it.
Good for you, because it does come naturally. And I also think that there's a level of confidence that allows that to come naturally. Do you think that's maybe because you started later in your 30s?
Absolutely. I do not think that I would have had this type of confidence when I was younger, which I don't know why that is. I don't know why as younger girls we don't feel like we can fully be ourselves. I think as we get older and we have life experience, you just really kind of come into your own. And I've never, again, like I was saying, everybody who was doing this when I started was way younger than me. So I was like, man, I don't look like these girls. They're all like, I'm like 5'1", a little under 5'2", a lot older. All these girls were like tall and beautiful and young, and I would look different, and also being a minority as well. Like I looked different than everybody that I saw on social media. So it was definitely stepping out of my comfort zone. But I think when you, again, are just being authentic and natural to who you are, you kind of stop caring about everything else.
I love that. And I agree with you that I don't know what it is about being younger, that I think it's such a natural thing that we all go through, right? But there's very few women that I've talked to, especially on the podcast, that can say like, yeah, I've always been a confident person.
Oh no, that was not the case for me.
No, not at all. So I'm curious what your confidence journey kind of looked like growing up until you got to your mid 30s.
Mm-hmm. I almost feel that others would probably describe me as confident, to be honest, when I was younger, because I think I was in some ways like fake it till you make it type person. I think I've always been that way. I was small my whole life, like the smallest person in every room. And I think I tried to compensate for that with like a big personality. So I was like more loud and more outgoing and all those things. And I think those things can come off as confident. But in some ways, I think I was probably not so confident. And that's why I was that way. I actually always tell my youngest Sophia, because she's a tiny little thing too, and I always tell her like the best things come in small packages. You should be proud that you're small, and you should be, all these things. But I do think that we all have our insecurities, right? We all go through different like reasons of why we might feel that way. But I don't think I was always confident. I think I became confident as I had more life experience, and as I realized like, hey, I can add some value to this too, and I have my unique qualities as well.
Yeah. And now raising 2 girls.
Yeah.
To try and be confident in today's
society. I mean, it's something I think about all the time.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
And with social media, also knowing that that's what you do for work. And I think the way that you show up on social media is like you're a testament to everything that you preach, and you're really showing them that you can do anything and be anything. But with outside influences, how do you instill confidence in young women?
I mean, I think I'm still learning, honestly. Our kids don't have any social media yet. Like even Reza, who's 14, I mean, I think he's the only one left of his friend circle that doesn't have like Snapchat and Instagram and TikTok and all those things. And it's just a conscious choice we've made as a family that's just not something we're going to do until they're a little older. And I think because I'm on social media, I do see how it can affect you. I mean, even as a 43-year-old woman, I can be affected by social media. I find myself mindlessly scrolling, and I don't want that for them. I think we're growing up in a time where every part of everybody's life is so out there, and even these little kids, like they're Snapchatting all day long, sharing their location all day long. Every part of their day is documented. I just don't know that that's healthy for a younger person. I don't know. I'm learning to manage it at my age. I don't think my kids yet have the tools to be able to manage it at their ages.
I couldn't agree more with you. And I think that is something that it's obviously an individual parent decision.
For sure.
But I don't know any parent that can stand by and say it's healthy for them. And I think the added element of it being your job, are they more curious because of what you do for work? Or is it, since it's around so much, they don't want it as much?
I don't think that they really even realize like how much goes into what I do. I mean, they see me filming, but most people that follow me see that I'm not really following my kids around with my phone all day. I don't show them a ton. I show a little bit of our life, but really the reason I'm there is to share my personal life and my, beauty and fashion tips. Like my family, I do really kind of hold that a little bit more sacred, especially as I'm getting older. Like I want them to have a choice if they want to be on something or not. If I'm taking a campaign that includes them, I want them to be comfortable and want to do that too, especially as they're getting older. When they were little, it was different. Like, snapping a photo, they didn't care. But as they get older, like all their friends' moms follow so that their friends see, their teachers see, their principals see, like everybody sees it that they know, and they need to be comfortable with that too.
Yeah. It's stuff I haven't even thought about.
Yeah.
I have a handful of years until we get to that point.
You do, but it's something to think about, right?
It is something to think about. And I've gotten so many questions on like, are you going to show your child on social media? Are you going to try and focus on brand deals that revolve around your child? And there's so many different opinions. And I know it's a total personal choice, but it's like, I think about that stuff now that I'm like,
what am I going to do?
Right? What am I going to do? And also, is it funny to be able to like, I see so many moms that will do like funny videos of their kids, but then is that funny for them later on?
Right.
Like everything lives on the internet now.
Everything lives on the internet. That is so true. And I think, like I was saying, when they're little, it didn't bother me to have them on. And it didn't seem to bother them, like it was just all, of course I wasn't going to be like sharing anything embarrassing of them, but like funny things or like silly things or just them being cute, like it was fine for me. But like as they're getting older and they're going through different changes and they're, going through different struggles, I don't share that online.
Yeah. You have good boundaries.
Yeah.
With what is appropriate and what's not. And it sounds like your community respects that as well.
Absolutely.
Because I do know a handful of creators that I've talked to feel like they have to share everything.
Yeah, I do not feel that way.
Good.
Yeah.
You've established a really respectful community and I love that for you.
And I think that maybe as I've gotten older, it's not that I don't care, but I'm going to do what feels right for me and my family. And if people wouldn't respect that, they can unfollow, and I don't say that in an ugly way because I love the following that I have and all those things. But, I think your family and your mental health and all those things like have to come first. Like if you don't have that, what do you have?
Without a doubt. You have to really focus on your real life.
100%.
And the people that are living with you every single day.
I'm not like living on social media. I'm living my life in real life, and social media is an aspect of that,
And you pick and choose what you want to share.
100%.
You're in control of that.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder for people too, because I think people assume that you know everything about somebody else and that you then have the right to judge somebody that you don't truly know. And
the judgment's wild. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a slippery slope where social media can be a blessing, but it can also be a curse.
Yeah.
But you mentioned how you really saw that your community actually loves you and is there for you and wants the best for you. And I'm sure that happened the more vulnerable you got with your diagnosis. Do you mind kind of walking me through? I don't know the depths of your story and when you found out, so I'm curious.
For sure. So I have always been like a really healthy, active person. I didn't have like any underlying health issues or anything like that. I turned 40 and I went for my normal mammogram. So I turned 40 the year of COVID. And so it was really long waits to get into the doctor. Really, I never missed any appointments or anything like that, but I was like halfway through my 40th year when I went for my first mammogram. And I knew right away when I was in that room with the tech that something was wrong because I could just tell by her mannerisms completely changing while we were in there. And she left the room for a minute. She came back and she said, "The radiologist wants me to take some more pictures." And I was like, what? Like, okay, that's weird. And just for some context, I had what they told me now are like very dense breasts, which is really can be really difficult to detect breast cancer or lumps and all of those things because I had never felt any change in my breast. Looking back, I don't know that I was as educated as I wish I had been about what that might look like or feel like. It just wasn't something that I had heard a lot about. I didn't have many friends that had gone through it or had detected like a breast cancer. So anyways, the radiologist calls me back and basically the worst bedside manner I've ever experienced with a doctor. He said, I'm 95% sure this is breast cancer and you need to get a biopsy like today. And I was like, wait, what? Like completely in shock. I had zero inkling this could be a thing. I actually, once my mammogram was ordered, I think I waited like 4 or 5 weeks to even book it because I just didn't think of anything. I was like, oh, I'm 40, I'm going for my mammogram. There's nothing that would indicate this being like something that needs to be rushed.
And it never ran in your family. It was never.
I do not have any history of breast cancer in my family.
Wow.
So the next few weeks were really awful, like really worse than probably one could imagine. Like I think my husband and I didn't sleep for like days. We were just a shell of ourselves. I think we both lost so much weight. It was just the unknown. We didn't know. So I luckily got in for a biopsy super quickly. That got fast tracked to my oncologist super quickly because my cancer was very large in my breast. It was advanced. They could tell right then from the mammogram. So I go to my oncologist's office. She does kind of like a exam physically and was like, your liver seems kind of hardened just by touch, like on the outside of my body. Like, I'm going to send you for a full body scan. And I was like, what? Like, what does that even mean? You already hear breast cancer and you think, like, that's it, I'm dying. Like, this is the way. I didn't know a lot about breast cancer. I know way too much about it now, unfortunately. But she sends me for a PET scan, and we got the news that my cancer had spread to my liver. So it was actually stage 4 metastatic breast cancer right from the jump, which was honestly the biggest shock. And then from there, we're just spiraling, right? Like as a family, we're so confused. How did this happen? With zero symptoms. I honestly think at that time I was actually in the best physical shape I'd ever been in. I was going to Orange Theory 5 days a week. I was physically so in shape. I felt good. I didn't feel anything that would indicate that something was so terribly wrong with my health.
Wow.
Yeah. So the next steps from there were to get a brain scan and to get this scan and that scan, make sure it hadn't gone anywhere else. And thank God it hadn't. It was just my liver at that point. And my oncologist was very positive and said, she was honest and said, this is bad. Like, this is really bad, but we have really effective medications. I think I started chemo 10 days after finding out. It happened so fast.
What a whirlwind.
It happened so fast. One day we were literally just like living our lives, and 10 days later I was going in knowing I was about to lose all my hair and everything else. It was really, really, really hard. And at first I thought, this is so personal. Like, there is no way I'm sharing this online. Like, I'm going to have to stop doing what I'm doing. I just have to take an exit, and that's just going to be it. But then I realized, like, gosh, there are probably so many people out there I could help by sharing this. And I think because on the outside, I looked like a very healthy, people have a very unfortunate misconception that people who get breast cancer or cancer in general are unhealthy people. Mm-hmm. And it's really so far from the truth. It can truly happen to anybody. Now that I'm immersed in this community, I know so many people who, what I would have considered like the pillar of health, like vegans and, fitness people and all kinds of things that on paper look so healthy and seem so healthy, that got an unfortunate diagnosis as well. And I think that we're hearing more and more about it as time goes on, because it is unfortunately so prevalent now. So yeah, that's kind of where it started.
Wow. And this was, so you said COVID is when you got your first.
So 2020 is when I turned 40, and mid 2021 was when I had my first mammogram. So we were out of like the trenches of COVID, but it was still at a time where everything was so delayed, and, nurses and everything, doctors, it was a weird time to be going through that. You couldn't have people at your appointments. The only reason I was allowed to bring my husband to my chemotherapies, because you were not allowed to have somebody with you, which is so scary, was because I decided to do something called cold capping to try to save some of my hair. Cold capping is a method, and I've talked so much about this on my Instagram channel because I had no clue what this was, and I want people to know about this option because I never did. But it's basically a system where, the chemotherapy goes into your bloodstream and it attacks all your cells, all your bad cells, right? Unfortunately, it also attacks your good cells. So the ones, your hair and nails, like just everything. And so it makes your hair fall out. That's what I always associated cancer with, is baldness. But there's a system where basically you put on these caps that bring your scalp to a cooled temperature to basically protect those cells from being infiltrated by the chemotherapy, is the way I understand it. I'm sure I'm messing that up and somebody will correct me, but something along those lines. It's not an easy thing to do. It was super hard. It is so cold. I can't remember the exact temperature your scalp gets to, but it is so uncomfortable. But for me, all I could think about was, how am I going to keep some normalcy for my kids? And I thought my appearance was one of those things, because they were still little. Sophia was 5 years old, I believe, at the time. And I just, especially with girls looking up to their mom, not that hair defines you and makes you who you are, but for me, my appearance was part of what I was very worried about for my kids. Because when you look sick, that's what's scary to the kids,
And I think so many women can relate to that.
Oh, 100%. I think it's not something that's talked about as often as I wish it was, but I think so many of us that go through this, one of our very first thoughts after, am I going to survive, is, what am I going to look like? And then adding the layer of being on social media and my appearance being a big part of what I share, I was so scared and so worried about sharing this and having everybody get a first-hand view, front row view of everything that was changing.
I can't imagine what was going through your mind during that time. I mean, 10 days to make the decision. And obviously it was, you either do chemotherapy or
there was
you
no
don't
decision
survive.
to be made. It was you've got to start this like right away. Like, we can't wait. So I first went through a surgery. I think it was probably even 4 days after I found out, to get a port placement, which was basically a device in which they implant into your chest to administer the chemotherapy.
Okay.
So within just a couple days, I went and got my eyebrows microbladed. I got my port placed, and then I had a few days to recover from that surgery, and then went straight into chemotherapy.
And what does chemotherapy look like?
Yeah. So for me, for my type of cancer, which was stage 4 metastatic triple positive breast cancer, which means it was hormone positive, with no BRCA gene or any other genetic component that they could test for at that time, that was positive. And my chemotherapy regimen was going to be 6 rounds of a cocktail of drugs over the course of 18 weeks. So every 3 weeks I would go in for an infusion, and it was a few hours there, but the whole process was probably about 6 hours or more in some days, because the cold capping adds a lot of hours to your treatment. You cold cap before, during, and after your treatment, so that while those drugs are going through your body, your scalp is being cooled down to this temperature. So that was the process for me. And then I had much more to my treatment. I went through 28 rounds of radiation. I did a double mastectomy with reconstruction. It was a long deal. But I still remember so many people telling me that had been through this, because of course the outpouring came out, once I shared it. So many women shared their experiences with me. But one person specifically said, you're giving up 1 year of your life to get the rest of your life back. And I remember telling myself that all the time, like, okay, 1 year, 1 year, 1 year. And that really, of course it doesn't end at 1 year, it's ongoing. And for me, because of how advanced my cancer was, I will always be in some sort of treatment. I'm still undergoing treatment. So it's a lifelong thing for me. But I think at the end of the day, I tell myself, like, what would the alternative be? I could be dead. Like, that's the alternative. And that is the reality for many people with my type of diagnosis. And I'm not, and I'm still here, and I have what I feel a lot more to do and a lot more time with my family. And if this is what my cards that have been dealt to me are, then I've just got to I've got to do it. And that's just the way it is.
I mean, you have an unbelievable perspective, and you have no choice but to have that perspective, which I really admire. I think when people go through such difficulties, or you get dealt this deal of cards that make no sense, people are like, you're so strong. Yeah. It's like, well, you didn't have a choice but Truly. To be really strong, but I'm sorry that you had to use that strength.
Thank you. It was a dark time.
Unimaginable.
It was a dark time. I never want to make it sound like it was easy, because I have gotten a few girls being like, I wish it was like that for me. Like, I struggled so much, and I struggled, but I made a decision the day that we found out that I'm a compartmentalized person just in my personality and in my life. I was not going to define my entire life by this. I was not going to be like, cancer is who I am, you know. Cancer is a piece of who I am, and it will be with me till the day I die, and that is the reality. But it's not going, I'm going to do everything I can to show up in every other way too.
Yeah. And knowing that you got your diagnosis so young and you had such young kids, how, if there's anybody listening that has also experienced something like this or have a loved one that is, how do you navigate those kind of conversations with your children?
Yeah, I remember that day so clearly because we were really struggling with what to talk about. There is an amazing organization specifically in Austin. It's called Wonders and Worries. It's a free organization to patients going through cancer, and they had reached out to me, I think through my oncology office, and I at first was like, oh, I don't need this kind of stuff. I don't need the external noise. I don't want to talk to anybody. Like, I already have enough on my plate. But I decided to take the call. And I'm so glad I did, because they really walked me through the right way, or a healthy way to approach the kids and have this conversation. And they talked a lot about what would be scary to them is the word cancer, but also the physical changes, and to kind of talk about that. Yes, because to them, I was perfectly healthy. Like, I didn't present as a sick mother or a sick person, right? They see me perfectly healthy. I actually felt great when I had cancer, but I was not going to feel so great when I was going through chemotherapy. So explaining to them that it's not the cancer that's making me look and feel like this. It's the drugs that make you, the medicine that makes you look and feel like this. But I have to do this. The yucky medicine's going to make, get the cancer out of my body, and really just having like those types of conversations. I do remember my son was older. He's 14 now. He was 11 then. And I remember him being like, "You're not going to die, are you?" And I said, "No, like, this is our doctor fully believes like that my medication's going to work." And he's like, "Is this like really, really bad?" And I said, "This is not good, but I'm not going anywhere,
Wow. I can't imagine how difficult it was to even have to.
It was really hard. That was the hardest part. Before we told them, we decided to do like a photo shoot with them, with like our family photos with them, because I really wanted to capture this time before the storm, like this one time that we probably would never have again. Them, never knowing about what was to come, And I used to be so like worried about protecting them from all those feelings, but I think what I've learned is it has like built their character so much. Sorry, when I talk about them.
They get to see their mom fighting the biggest battle all the time and still showing up and having a smile on her face and being you.
Yeah, and I think the type of empathy that you like build as a human being like comes from experiences,
Yeah.
And so them having this experience at such a young age, I do believe will set them up just to be better, kinder, more empathetic people.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Without a doubt. So after you go through, you said 28 rounds?
So I did 6 rounds of chemotherapy, and then I had my surgery, which was a double mastectomy and deep flap reconstruction, which is a very in-depth 10-hour surgery. I mean, it was a serious, serious surgery. But I had no evidence of disease at the end of this treatment, which was honestly kind of a miracle in many ways. My doctor was so happy with my results, and I felt like we were smooth sailing. Like, I was so relieved. It didn't even matter what I had gone through and what was still to come. I just had really beat the odds at that point. And even through treatment, I continued to work. I continued to exercise. I really tried to show up the best that I could, because I think that normalcy, don't get me wrong, I could have laid in bed and cried all day and I was allowed to,
yes.
But what good was that going to bring me? I don't know. I'm not one of those people that is I just wasn't going to sit there and feel sorry for myself. I have days where I allow myself to feel sorry for myself still to this day. But I can't sit in that for too long because I think it's super unhealthy. It's not productive for me. It just puts me in a darker place versus being like, okay, this is what I can control. I can take care of my health in this way. I can be there for my kids in this way. I can be there for my husband in this way. I can live my life, because if I'm not going to live what life we have, what is this all for? Yeah. So I went through that. Chemotherapy, surgery, 28 rounds of radiation, which is daily. So for 28 days, you go every single day. I had full breast radiation on my right side and my lymph nodes. And then after that, I went back to my immunotherapy, which is something that I have to receive forever, which is also every 3 weeks. And that was in hopes to keep me cancer-free. Unfortunately, last October, I had another recurrence, or I had my first recurrence, which was, again, so shocking because I really believed that I was cured, You
felt good.
I felt amazing. 0 symptoms. That's the scary part about cancer, is you just really don't know. But I was thankfully being monitored so closely. I was getting blood tests every 4 weeks, and I was getting my infusion every 3 weeks and a PET scan every 3 months. And that PET scan, it was actually the first time my doctor had suggested, like, hey, we've reached almost the 2-year mark. I think we can spread out your scans a little bit if you want, if you feel comfortable. And I was like, I just don't feel comfortable yet. So it was that next scan, that was at 3 months, that they found 2 tiny little spots in my lungs on a scan. And again, just spiraled, because why wouldn't I? I thought, I've beat the odds, and here we are. How could I beat the odds again? That's not going to happen. So I was really scared, really worried what was going to happen next, because I knew I was going to have to do some sort of treatment. And honestly, chemotherapy is hands down the hardest part of this journey, and one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. No, not one of. It is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And I've given childbirth 3 times, It was hard.
Yeah. Just the toll it takes on your body.
Just the emotional roller coaster that is chemotherapy with the hair loss, because I lost 80% of my hair, even with cold capping. I looked very different than I was used to looking, and that was really hard for me. But the cold capping still gave me some normalcy to look as normal as I could have in front of my kids. I'd wear a wig every now and then, but I mostly just wore a hat and had my hairs, kind of arranged in a way that made me still feel good or whatever. So I was really worried about physical appearance again and what treatment would look like, but they switched me to another drug, which there are advancements being made in metastatic breast cancer and just breast cancer in general, advancements that are out of this world. If I had received my diagnosis just 2 years before I had, things could look very different. The treatment I'm on now is rough. I go every 3 weeks. It gives me debilitating nausea for about 2 to 3 days, and that's every 3 weeks. This drug that I'm on doesn't cause full hair loss, but it can cause hair thinning. So just because I'm scared, I cold cap as well, which is a beast again. Yeah. So it's a whole thing. It has changed our lives. It has turned our lives upside down. But also in many ways, I am truly so dang thankful, because things could look so different for me, if it wasn't for these amazing drugs and the amazing response that my body has had to these drugs, because they still do believe now, after they found those spots, after about 3 treatments, they were gone. So we caught it so early. And the drug that I'm on will hopefully keep me in remission longer than the one previously.
My goodness.
Yeah. Roller coaster.
What a roller coaster.
It's the best way to describe it.
My gosh.
An actual roller coaster that sometimes you're just someone get
you're
me
can
off
I
this
get
ride?
off, please?
Someone
I didn't sign up for this.
Yes.
And it's mind-boggling to me, because even though I don't want to have an idea of what it looks like to have cancer in my mind, you are not somebody that would ever come across to me as somebody that could struggle with cancer. And I think that's the underlying message of everything that you're doing, is that just because you don't feel sick doesn't mean that it can't happen to you.
Yeah.
Or can't happen to your loved ones.
It was truly the biggest shock. And I wish that there were different, I wish that mammograms were earlier. I wish that if I had gone just 2 years earlier, because that cancer had probably been living in my body for some time. After my third child is probably when it started developing.
Wow.
So it had been there a long time, and for it to become metastatic, like, it doesn't happen overnight, you know?
And what does metastatic mean?
Metastatic means that it has left the site that it started and spread elsewhere in your body. And that could be with breast cancer, it's often lungs, bone, and brains. That's where it goes with my specific type. So the liver was a little like scary because we were like, how did this,
How to get there, yeah.
happen? And again, no symptoms. But my liver was actually the very first thing to respond. Like, by the time I had actually gotten a biopsy, they started me on chemotherapy so fast that they didn't even biopsy my liver tumor yet. They just wanted me to get in as fast as possible. And by the time they had biopsied it, which was, I think, only after one treatment, it was 99% necrotic, which means that 99% dead cancer cells.
Wow.
So it responded so fast. That's how amazing these drugs are. And I think because I was a very otherwise healthy person, my body, like, I never missed a chemo, because a lot of times your body, like, your platelet levels will drop, or like your immune system gets so bad and you get really sick and you can't make it to your next treatment. They have to push it out. That never happened to me, thank goodness. It still hasn't happened to me, thank goodness. And I think that I worked really hard to stay healthy in every other way that I could. And I still do.
Yeah.
I'm super active. I exercise at least 4 times a week and try to just keep my body in the best shape it can be, despite being knocked out by these powerful but effective drugs.
Well, you're controlling what you can control.
Exactly.
And I think the mental aspect has to play such a huge role.
I would almost go on a limb to say that it's 80% of it. Like, if I did not, and my doctor would even tell me, like, you are so positive, stay like that, you are doing so great. Like, people really crumble in these situations, and those are the people who can't make it through their treatment, and then it affects you physically. And she just said, you have to, like, really fight with your mind. And that never has faltered for me. Like, I mean, like I said, I have had days that are dark, and I think really dark things, and I Google way too much, and the information that's out there is not in my favor. So there are dark times, but you can't for anybody, what they're going through in life. If you just focus on what could negatively happen to you, I mean, life can change for anybody in an instant. And I'm just really trying to live in the present and not try to, I don't know, predict what's going to happen next, because I don't know.
I'm sure this experience has given you a newfound perspective on life and how fragile it is.
Yes.
And how beautiful it is.
Yeah.
And I hate that you had to have an experience like that for it to give you that perspective in any way. Mm-hmm. But I do feel like you are one of the rare ones that truly understands the value of life.
I think that when you go through something that's really hard, whether that's cancer or whatever that might be, you just have a different perspective on what matters. Mm-hmm. I mean, all the little things that we worry about and all the silly things that we spend so much energy on about worrying, for different reasons, seems so dumb. Yeah. For lack of a better word, it just seems so pointless. And just focusing on what you can control in your life, focusing on the people that matter most in your life, because that was also a big shift for me. I had to really make a life change. I had to distance myself from people that were not true friends. And you really do find out who are your true friends when you go through something like this as well.
I can imagine.
Yeah, you really do. And that's hard. It's really hard to feel, everybody wants to be your friend when things are great, but who's going to really be there when things are not great? And those are the people that I could choose to surround myself with now.
What was some of the most meaningful actions that good friends did for you to be able to actually make you feel seen and taken care of from a friend perspective?
Yeah. I first want to say that I think nobody knows the right thing to do in these situations. I definitely didn't. I did have one friend who went through early stage breast cancer before me, and she didn't go through chemotherapy and all of that, but she did still have a big life change. She had to undergo major surgery and all these things. And I look back and I was like, gosh, I was a terrible friend. Like, I had no clue what she was going through because I really didn't. I just was like, oh, phew, she had a surgery. She's cancer-free. Great. But it never ends there. It never ends. No matter what stage your breast cancer was caught at, it is a lifelong journey. It is never over. You know, there are so many medications you're put on for the rest of your life for 10 years, 15 years. And there's so many doctor's appointments and all these things. And I look back and I really feel that I had no idea what that was like. And so I give a lot of my friends grace because they didn't know either. But in terms of actions that really meant something, I'm really not just saying this, but it wasn't as much like these big grand actions that people did, because while those were lovely and making meals and bringing them and sending gifts and all that, that was so kind and thoughtful. But the things that I really needed were the people who consistently checked on me, even when I was pushing them away, you know, because people would be like, how are you? And I'd be like, well, how do you think I am? I mean, that's not what I would say, but that's what I'm thinking. Like, how do you think I am? Like, I wouldn't even reply sometimes because I was so in it, you know? I was still angry. I was like, you know, but those friends who would be like, hey, I don't know what to say. I'm just checking in with you again. I haven't heard back from you. And they would consistently reach out, show up at my house, take my kids out of the house, you know, come with me, come over and be like, let's go on a walk. Let's get out of here. Like, you need to get some fresh air. You know, those types of things are really what matters, just to not feel forgotten, because everybody's life goes on. I say this all the time. Everybody's life goes on, but yours does not. Yours feels completely stopped. And that is a really difficult place to be. And I think that's what most of us who've been through this struggle with even moving forward, is everybody's life goes back to normal, but ours never does. It's a new normal. It's a different normal. But feeling forgotten or kind of left in the dust while everybody's just like happy and healthy is a really hard place to be. So I think it's the friends that make you realize or make you feel like you are not forgotten. Those are the gestures that I will never forget, and the people I will never forget.
Nobody knows what to do in impossible situations like that, but something that I've noticed is the only wrong thing to do is not show up.
Yes.
Even if you don't have the words to say, like you just said, I literally don't know what to say, but I'm here.
Yeah.
Do you want to vent? Do you want to talk?
There isn't anything anyone could have said to me, including my parents, my sisters, my husband, but they were all there. That's all that they can do, and that was all I needed. That's really all you need when you're going through something, is just to know that people are there. Mm-hmm.
People are there. People care.
People care.
And they see you as you're going through the process, because I'm sure it can feel isolating.
Oh, it's incredibly isolating because nobody will ever get it. I didn't get it until I went through it. Nobody will, even what my husband was going through, like that's a whole different, you know, I think the only thing that would have been harder for me going through it is having someone in my family go through it, because watching somebody go through such a horrible time and a horrible process and a very difficult surgery and a very difficult treatment is grueling, you know? And so I think those that supported him were really important to me, that supported my kids, you know, my kids did amazing through it. And I think that really is a testament to our family and our dynamic, and my sisters and parents and grandparents, everybody that was making sure that they did not skip a beat is what carried us through the entire year that we were going through, that we were really in the trenches, you know?
Yeah. You had made a comment earlier that you didn't know. You didn't know what to look for. Mm-hmm. Could there have been any signs, if people are listening that have never done a self-exam, that have no ideas, what do you know now that could serve somebody?
I was not consistent ever in doing self-exams. I don't even believe I really knew how to do it. I think I would just like feel around like, oh, I don't feel anything.
Yeah.
I also had very large, dense breasts, so I wouldn't have really maybe felt this as, unfortunately. I don't know that I would have caught it myself, and that's just my honest answer. I wish I could say like, oh, you know, if you do this, you'll catch it. There, you just really don't ever miss your annual exam, ever, ever, ever. Do not delay your appointments. Do not make it a priority. As moms, like, would you ever miss your child's vaccine or 1-year checkup, or if they're sick, are you going to skip an appointment? Never. Like, I never have done that for my kids. But you can sure believe that I was late for a lot of things for myself always, my entire life. I think it was actually not that year, but there was one time where I went 3 or 4 years without ever seeing my gynecologist. And that's crazy. Like, why would I mean, especially
put your own health on the back burner.
Put my own health on, and that's what I did though. I had seen my doctor years leading up to this diagnosis, but what if I hadn't? What if I continued on that track? Like, what if that could have been very well the case because I didn't make it a priority before? But I do think that it was just like meant to be, like God's hands, like interjecting in my life and like making it my health a priority. There was one thing that happened, and I look back at it and I'm like, this had to have been it. But there was a time, or we don't know. My doctor says we don't know, but I had a lump in my armpit, my underarm.
Okay.
It was the summer before I was diagnosed. And I remember being like, oh, this must be an ingrown hair or something. I didn't even think that it could be related.
Why would you?
No, but that's where your lymph nodes are, and there absolutely could have been inflammation in a lymph node causing that. But I called my dermatologist's office and I was like, hey, I have this weird little bump in my underarm. Like, I feel like I should come in and like, maybe it's an ingrown hair, like maybe something. And they're, again, it was the year of COVID. They're like, sure, we can see you in 6 weeks on blah, blah, blah day, or 8 weeks or whatever. So like, okay, I made the appointment. By the time the appointment date had come, that was gone already. So I canceled it.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that I look back and was like, I wish that I knew that could have been a sign, because it absolutely could have been a sign. You know, it could have been at that time passing through my lymph nodes, even, is what I imagine in my mind. My doctor's like, well, that's not really how it works, but it could have, yes. But in my mind, I'm like, gosh, if I had like known and called my gynecologist and said that, they would have said, come in now. I do believe they would have said, come in now.
And I think just prioritizing your health, because there's so little that if you don't have a medical background of any type, like you don't know unless you know, unless you've been through it.
Yeah.
That I think just for everybody listening too, like you have to prioritize your health.
You have to prioritize your health, and you also have to really be your own advocate. I'm not saying this to create fear, but I was put back on birth control a year before my diagnosis because my periods were very irregular. And this is like maybe TMI, and maybe you want to share this part, but no blood work was run before putting me on that. No questions were asked, no special type of testing done. But for a woman at that age, being put back on a hormonal birth control, and my cancer later being hormone positive, like, those were questions I should have known to ask for, and I didn't. I didn't know to ask, like, hey, before we do this, can you check my estrogen levels? You know, I wish I had known that, and I would have asked those questions. But I would just say to anybody listening, like, do your research before, you know, these doctors are so busy. And I don't fault my doctor, because why would she have thought something was wrong? I was a healthy person. But I do really regret not having some sort of panel run on me before being put on a ton of hormones, you know?
And I think we often are so trusting because we're so busy that it's like, oh, if you tell me to do this, like, sure.
Right.
And you don't think about any of the possible outcomes. But the older you get, the more you have to start advocating for yourself.
And I don't believe that caused anything, but do I believe that it exacerbated things and like put my body out of whack and my immune system at risk with everything that was going on? And I do. I personally do.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, you'll never know.
Yeah, I'll never know.
But I think I can speak for the majority of women that are just like, oh, well, I'm too young, or that would never happen to me, or it doesn't run in my family. Where I'm realizing as we're talking right now, that is an October Breast Cancer Awareness Month.
Yeah.
And we've rescheduled this 3 times.
Yeah.
And I think it couldn't come at a better time, because although you should be checking yourself more than just a month, I think it's important for women to know that you can't assume.
No, and you can never, this can never be put on the back burner. You know, it's like something that's real. And I was 40 when I was diagnosed, but I know dozens and dozens of women now that were diagnosed as early as 28 years old, 27 years old, early 30s, zero history of breast cancer, no symptoms, nothing, except for finding a lump in their breast by self-exam. And also still even then being told like, oh, it's probably a cyst, or, oh, it's probably fibrosis, or whatever all those reasons are. And them pushing for this, you know, this type of MRI, and pushing for a biopsy and finding things that way. Like, you really have to be your own advocate, and you really have to listen to your body. If you feel like something is wrong, like, don't let someone tell you nothing's wrong.
I also feel like it's really powerful that you did have such a powerful platform at the time that this happened to you, because I do think in some way this is part of your purpose, and God used you to be able to influence millions of women to take their health seriously. I mean,
I, honest to God, believe that the reason this happened to me was because I could shed so much light in a public, place for awareness for this, because like I said, I don't look like the person that would have cancer. I've had doctors, oncologists, radiologists, all types of people reach out to me and been like, you won't believe how many patients I've seen that came in because of you. Wow. That came in for their MRI or their their mammogram because of you. And that is like everything to me. Or people that have reached out to me is like, you know what, I ignored my appointment forever and I finally went and I just discovered I have stage 2 breast cancer. And if I hadn't gone because of hearing your story, like I would have been in a different place. And that's like really powerful for me to hear, because it gives me purpose.
Yeah, it gives your pain purpose.
Yeah, it gives exactly that, like turning pain into a purpose. And I think that is a really healing place to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful that you are on, although you're never going to be completely through it, but on the other side, that you can look back at a really difficult chapter of your life and have such a beautiful perspective of it.
Yeah. I mean, I feel really thankful to be where we are right now, because it could look a lot different. And yeah, just, I can't predict the future. I don't know what's going to happen. And of course there are times where I'm scared of what's next, because eventually there probably will be something next. That's just the way this disease goes. But tomorrow's not promised for anybody. And that's just how I've had to really shift my perspective.
How do you maintain a strong marriage?
Gosh, we're in these days, I feel like life is so busy and so chaotic. But Nazem and I have always had like a very strong foundation. There is nobody in the world I trust more than him. There's nobody in the world that I rely on more than him. He is truly a rock. And I think just like both of us put each other as a priority. There's nobody more important to me than him. And while we don't have all the time in the world to like go on date nights and things like that anymore, now that our kids' schedules really dictate our lives, we are always each other's like biggest fans and he is such a support. He has taken care of me in like at the very worst of times. And I think that bond that is created, I think we're closer than we've ever been before. You really rely on somebody when you're going through something like this. And he had to really step up. And it could have looked differently for him. Not everybody's partner is that way. I know women who've gone through this and felt very isolated from their partner. I felt the complete opposite. I remember in the beginning, even I wouldn't even go to bed if he wasn't in the room. Like I was so scared to be alone, But yeah, he's incredible, and he really showed up for me and still does every day. Everybody that follows me knows I don't cook anymore. He doesn't let me do anything. He takes care of me to a fault almost at this point. He wants me to just focus on my health and what I love to do, which is creating content and continuing to work. And that's my focus. And he takes all the rest of the brunt work off of me.
That's not true love right there. I don't know what is.
I always tell him if he can love me the way that he, like, after seeing me at my absolute worst and still wants to show up like this for me, like it says a lot.
I am such a big believer that in the early stages of even dating and being engaged and being married, you see these characteristics 100%. In somebody that you know that if push come to shove, they are capable of showing up. Mm-hmm. And I think there's so many people now, especially because we have access to social media, that we see these super over-the-top, romantic, amazing, going on all these dates and flying you everywhere.
Right.
And we get confused that that's what true love is.
Yeah,
I think we got to strip it back to the character part.
Yeah, the character. Like, I remember what my mom, she'll say this, is she'll never forget that I invited my parents or him to an event that my parents were at, and they were going to meet. And she's like, I'll never forget you were running late. I was like, it was a work thing it was the grand opening of a business I was working for. And they had served dinner and he wouldn't eat because I wasn't seated yet. And she was like, everybody was eating and he still would not eat because you were not there yet. And she still brings that up. And I just remember that so clearly because that's exactly how he is. Like he just puts everybody, not just me even, our children, our parents, our siblings, like everybody before himself. And I think when you're in a true partnership, like you really do put the other person first, you know?
That's beautiful. How many years have you been married?
Oh my gosh, we will celebrate 18 years of marriage this year. 18,
wow.
right? We got married in 2006, so yeah.
18
years. We recently had 2 years ago for our 16th year, our sweet 16 anniversary, we had like a big anniversary party and vow renewal with our kids and all of our like closest inner circle friends. And it was literally the most special thing in the world.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Having your children be a part of it, gosh. I can't even imagine.
I never got to see something like that with my parents, you know, and just for them to see that, I think that they'll never forget that.
You've been an unbelievable role model to not only millions of people on the internet, but your children, the marriage that they see, the woman that they see in their mom.
Thank you.
I said it to start this episode. I've admired you from afar for a long time, and I knew bits and pieces of your story, and you are.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. Thank you.
Well, before I cry too much, I like to end our episodes because I notice that women often have a difficult time taking a second to think back to something in this week that you're proud of yourself for. And so personally or professionally, what is something that has happened in the last week that you're proud of yourself?
So I just this week got back from LTKCon, and I remember, which is for those who aren't listening who don't know what that is, it's a big conference where creators are invited to share their, just to network and meet with brands, share their experiences with each other and all of those things. And I remember when I was first starting this journey, I never imagined myself to be professionally where I am because I really just didn't know where it was headed. I just started for fun, realized it could become a business, but never envisioned the business to become what it is now. And I was asked for the second time this year to lead a classroom session for hundreds of other creators to share my tips and like business tips and how to, get to where I have been able to get to. And I remember before the class, one of the girls being like, "Can you believe we're here? Like you're leading a classroom teaching all these creators, some of them who've been doing this much longer than you, on how to be successful." And I was like, wow. And in my head, I was thinking, and I did that like while going through cancer. Like it feels really good.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
You should be so proud of yourself.
I am, because it wasn't easy to get here.
No. And the fact that you made the conscious decision to keep going.
Yeah.
Has to feel really good.
It was not an easy decision to make, and there are times where it felt really too personal. Yeah. But I do know that it's brought me way more good and people way more good, that it was worth every second of the discomfort and vulnerability. It was worth it, not just because of my own personal therapy, which it really became like that, but because I do know and believe that I really have helped a lot of women. And that is everything.
And to get recognition on such a major platform.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's amazing. I
Thank
hope
you
that
so
you are
much.
celebrating.
I am proud of that. Yes.
I hope that you've done something to really encapsulate that, because that's major.
Thank you.
Well, I could talk to you all day.
Thank you so much for having me. This
fun.
was so much fun. I'm sorry that I'm like a crybaby. It's just the way I am.
Are you kidding me? It's not like we're talking about light topics in any way, but I got so much value out of this, and I know so many women that are listening. So if you guys have not already, make sure you are following the More Than podcast, rate, review this episode, and more importantly, share it with somebody. Yeah. Share it with another woman so that she can hear your story. Thank you.